Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for Tuesday, August the 31st, 2021. There's an election going on in my country, Canada, and as always, it is presented as the most important election of a generation, a lifetime, whatever. I don't know how important it is for the reason that there is almost no difference between the three major Canadian political parties, the Liberals, the Conservatives, and the New Democratic Party. They're all left-wing, they're all woke. They just want to do the same things as we've been doing, only more so. In particular, replacing Canadians with foreigners. That seems to be the most important thing. But against what the experts had told us at the beginning, it appears that I'm going to keep making that mistake until the day I die. Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party is in trouble. It was just assumed by everyone that they were going to have no problem winning the election. It was just a question of whether they were going to have a majority or minority government. This is from the Post-Millennial today. The Conservatives continue to maintain their lead over the Liberals in the polls as of August 30th. And just let me say, if it were up to me, if I were a dictator, there would be no polling allowed to be published during election campaigns because it is manufactured consent. But anyway, this is from Main Street Research. Conservatives at 37%, Liberals at 29%, NDP at 19%, the Bloc Québécois, which is the sovereigntist party, at 6%. The People's Party of Canada, which is Maxime Bernier's, how should we say, libertarian / patriot party at 6%. Whereas the Green Party, who strangely chose a leader, a black woman with a shaved head, the Green Party is resolutely anti-Jewish, and yet this woman that they chose is Jewish, which has led to the party pretty much imploding. They are down to 3%. And so, what are the Liberals doing? Well, they're doing the same thing that they always do, accusing the Conservatives of a secret agenda, privatizing Medicare, doing all manner of horrible things. Justin Trudeau seems to be running against Stephen Harper, who hasn't been prime minister since 2015. And the Conservatives, of course, are sexist, racist, Islamophobes, transphobes, homophobes, etc., 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 or so they say. I'll have more on that in a minute. So the Liberals are lashing out, and the commentators gotten very nervous about this because apparently there's some unpleasantness in this election. And elections are not supposed to be unpleasant. They're supposed to be everyone agreeing with what is the Canadian thing to do, which once again is what we have been doing, only more so. So there's been a lot of hair pulling going on. This is from the Canadian Press. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, Jewish Liberal candidates faced racist attacks during election campaign. I talked about the Liberal signs with the swastikas on them. For Jewish candidates, the media knows very well where this meme comes from, of Israel being the new Nazi Germany. It comes from Muslims and their Antifa allies. But they don't want to mention that because it's kind of embarrassing, because we're all supposed to love each other in this country, and we don't. Increasingly, it is the war of all against all. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh had a racist remark directed at him while campaigning Wednesday in Windsor, Ontario. During a campaign event in a park, a man shouted, "Go back home," from a passing vehicle, while Singh, who was born in Scarborough, Ontario, and raised in Windsor, continued his speech undeterred. Speaking to reporters in a later news conference, Singh says he doesn't focus on himself when that kind of things happens, but he is concerned about the growing level of hate in Canada. Oh dear, someone told him to go back home. I hope he didn't cry himself to sleep. This is the same person who routinely describes Canada as a racist country. I believe his parents entered Canada about 2 years before he was born. I'm worried about people from the Muslim community who are worried about the attacks on Muslims and the rise of hate. I'm worried about anti-Semitism. We've seen attacks on synagogues attacking and targeting Jewish people. Of course, white people are routinely attacked in my country. I mean, what is white supremacy, accusations of white supremacy or of systemic racism, but attacks on white people? And oh, boo-hoo-hoo, Justin Trudeau has faced raucous crowds booing. This is from Gary Mason at the Globe and Mail, who's been around forever. There was always going to be consequences that flowed from holding a federal election amid a pandemic that has fueled a frightening rise in anger and hate in Canada. These pricks, they intend to control every aspect of our lives. And if there is any complaint, this constitutes a frightening rise in anger and hate in Canada. Liberal leader Justin Trudeau's campaign has been dogged in recent days by demonstrators representing the most contemptible element of the opposition that exists toward COVID-19 public health restrictions. For some, Trudeau has become a polarizing symbol of the unjust repression to which these folks have been subjected. Yeah, shut your business down. Don't leave home. Don't go outside. Wear a mask. Get 2 jabs, 3 jabs, or else. And oh no, who could call this unjust repression? It's tempting to write off the noisy protesters who shut down a planned Liberal campaign event in Bolton, Ontario Friday, and who disrupted another in Cambridge on Sunday as angry partisans with foul mouths. They are not. Many in those crowds are far more dangerous than that. And they're not going away anytime soon. The fact is, the pandemic has unleashed or perhaps revealed another pandemic, one of hate and extremism that is fed by a proliferation of lies and misinformation. We witnessed the danger inherent in this phenomenon when hundreds of supporters of former U.S. President Donald Trump stormed the Capitol in January. Well, there are likely thousands, maybe of tens of thousands of people in Canada who pose just as much of a threat to our institutions, to our way of life, to our democracy. Far-right extremism doesn't just reside in Canada. There are many who believe it's thriving, with social media being its poisonous lifeblood. Well, I have noticed, as you may have noticed, from the beginning of the COVID-19 panic, a great many of those people who have been skeptics are not right-wing, they are left-wing. But let's just pretend that that isn't true. Mason continues, people will say there have always been protesters and demonstrations at political campaign stops. This is true. There were the yellow vest demonstrators who disrupted Trudeau's rallies during the 2019 election. Union activists have caused havoc at Conservative campaign rallies for decades. Political leaders of all partisan stripes have been subjected to loud and often vulgar demonstrations. But the ones we are seeing these days are different. The vitriol and red-faced rage is next-level stuff. This is why security around Trudeau has been bolstered dramatically, and it's likely to stay this way for the rest of the campaign. This is not something the other federal leaders have so far had to worry about. It is, however, something which Conservative candidate Michelle Rempel-Garner is familiar. Recently, Garner and her husband were out having dinner when she was verbally accosted by a large, aggressive man demanding she respond to some conspiracy theory. She's been chased down the street while out campaigning by men wielding cameras, insisting she answer questions about other wacky notions propagated on the internet. Okay. Pandemic. Huh? So this fellow Mason, he accuses people who disagree with him of being diseased. Does that sound like unpleasant language to you? It certainly sounds like unpleasant language to me. But since Gary Mason is one of the good men, he can say whatever he likes about us and get away with it. And in another story, Trudeau, this is from the CBC, Trudeau says he won't back down after protesters hurl death threats, racist and sexist slurs. In 1968, June 1968, on Saint Jean-Baptiste Day, which is a holiday in the province of Quebec, and it was a couple of days before the election, Justin Trudeau's father, Pierre Trudeau, was sitting in a reviewing stand. He was pelted by stones and bottles while nationalists howled execration at him and demanded his execution. Pierre Trudeau stood in his seat, which impressed a great many people. Protesters heard shouting racist insults at police officer of color on protective detail. Let's see the video. Let's see the video. For the second time in a week, Liberal leader Justin Trudeau was at a campaign event disrupted by protesters shouting obscenities, uttering death threats against the Prime Minister, and hurling racist and misogynist insults at people of color and women in his protective detail. I'm not going to back down on a message that Canadians know is the right path forward. That's why Canadians need to choose to move Canada forward in this pivotal time. You see what an inspiring speaker he is? Forward, not backward, but forward. This is a man, Justin Trudeau, who regularly refuses to answer questions about immigration by calling questioners racists. Again, some people might consider that to be poisoning the wells, but not our media. And this is from Politico, which apparently has an interest in Canada. Toxic protesters turn the campaign ugly. I don't know, when Native Indians were shutting down our railway service last year and threatening to strangle Canada economically, I don't recall many people saying that these were toxic protests. Oh, welcome to the ugliest federal campaign in recent memory, well, at least until the next one. People who oppose vaccinations, masks, lockdowns, and the Prime Minister who supported all of those COVID-era measures are now mainstays on Justin Trudeau's campaign. Jagmeet Singh has faced racism on the trail. Well, a man who goes about, a federal political leader, who goes about routinely repeating how much he hates Canada. Oh, no. People are objecting to this. Unthinkable. This is from Post Millennial. Angelo Isidoro, a University of Toronto professor, raised eyebrows Sunday evening after alleging a Conservative Party tweet is a dog whistle for Nazism. David Fissman is a tenured professor of epidemiology and a former Ontario COVID-19 Science Table member. According to CP24, he resigned just last week, citing he did not want to further politicize COVID-19. Despite being lauded by allies for his alleged dedication to neutrality, Fissman is now the subject of a bizarre series of tweets, including one alleging the Conservative Party is using secret messaging to attract Nazis. Yeah, you really want to go after that huge Nazi bloc of voters in Canada. Wow. Now they've added secure the future for your children, and they've got the slogan in exactly 14 words. So creepy. His tweet read on Sunday. The professor then linked to the Wikipedia page for the 14 words, which is a secret code based on Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf. According to Fissman, the fact that the Conservative Party tweet contained exactly 14 words is reason enough to believe the party is secretly a Nazi party. Yes, and there's a picture on this Conservative poster of O'Toole meeting voters, and two of them are non-white. If you go to the Conservative Party main page, you will see O'Toole also campaigning. There are two people he is campaigning in front of. One of them is an African woman, and the other one is an African child. No one is going to beat Aaron O'Toole when it comes to pandering. Fistman's tweet gained immediate traction, with many not only pointing out the absurdity of the claim, but also the clearly partisan behavior exhibited by someone who was praised a week ago for being neutral and principled. Writer Jonathan Kay notes this bizarre and worrisome behavior may, quote, help explain why the claims he made to the media about COVID modeling always seemed dodgy. He said there was a cover-up but had no evidence, and his colleagues denied it. All the stories about Fistman's August the 23rd decision to quit were sourced to his own vague claims, unquote. Yes. When the other side routinely calls us Nazis, when they just make it up, is this not fostering an ugly culture in politics? Apparently not. Someone called Brian Pacifume tweeted, whoever had August 29th down for the conservatives are literally Hitler anti-Tory messaging pool. Please come forward to collect your $20 and second cup gift certificate. 14 words. Let's see, how many words do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Liberal Party issued a tweet saying the sirens in the background may remind us that this is a climate emergency. There are sirens now for allegedly rising temperatures. Someone called Rupa Supramanya had some fun with this. Wow, counted 14 words. Creepy. At the time of this publication, the tweet remains up. Since tweeting, Fistman has actively retweeted allies who agree with this position. It's no longer a dog whistle, it's a foghorn, says one of his followers. It remains to be seen whether the backlash will lead to the tweet being deleted or even legal action from the Conservative Party. Oh, and my favorite concern troller, Max Fawcett of the National Observer, fear and loathing in Canada. And yes, apparently people in the Conservative Party had said some things which were mean or not quite on message, with regard to climate change. And so, of course, this condemns the whole Conservative Party. Oh, Ontario Conservative MP Cheryl Gallant suggests that the Trudeau Liberals will start calling for a climate lockdown. And why does this seem so outrageous? Why? Not to me. Gallant said that she told a group of young conservatives at Queen's University that Liberals want all illicit drugs to be legal. They do. They have already done this. They're passing out free heroin. Guess what? Erin O'Toole, the leader of the Conservative Party, announced his drug program a week or two ago, and it's the de facto legalization of all drugs. Where has this fellow been? But as the poison of conspiracy theories about vaccines and climate change continues to spread into his base, he needs to make it a priority. The real question at this point is whether he even can. The CPC has spent so long winking at and flirting with this fringe element on the right that it may not be able to control or contain it. Indeed, O'Toole's victory in the leadership race was at least part as a result of his successful flirtation with Derek Sloan and his supporters. And while Sloan was booted out of the caucus, his base, the same one that nearly handed Maxime Bernier the leadership of the party in 2017, abides. Oh, so O'Toole did the regular conservative thing. He said, I'm a social conservative. You should be with me, not the other guy. Please give me your votes. And when the social conservatives, idiots that they are, show up to give people like Doug Ford and Erin O'Toole their votes, they quickly get kicked out of the party. Oh no, but who knows? Who knows what can happen here? Yeah. Imagine that. People getting angry during an election campaign. Let me wrap up this Canada stuff and then I'll go to the chat. Very bad news for Justin Trudeau today, and really kind of shocking considering profligate would not be a strong enough word to describe the spending of the federal government under Trudeau, with no end in sight. This is from Eric Hertzberg at Bloomberg. The Conservative leader, hoping to deny Justin Trudeau a third election victory, seized on a surprise contraction in Canada's economy as evidence of mismanagement of the governing Liberals. Under Justin Trudeau, we are heading further down the road of recession, not the road to recovery, O'Toole told reporters Tuesday. Statistics Canada released data a few hours earlier showing gross domestic product contracted 1.1% annualized in the second quarter, missing expectations for a 2.5% gain in the Bloomberg survey of economists. Now, again, this is shocking because, of course, government spending counts when GDP is devised. So, as I say, given the promiscuous, profligate, hardly believable spending of the federal government under Trudeau, the fact that GDP contracted 1.1% tells me that private business in this country is just being whacked. And again, Trudeau's, what does he have to say about the economy? Spend ourselves rich. Well, it doesn't seem to be working. Rachel Gilmore of Global News, who is apparently a journalist, I could hardly believe this lead to the story titled, "As O'Toole Wants Flag Raised, AFN Chief Says Half-Mast Honors Children Amid Unmarked Graves." Except for all of the, graves that are marked. Only the crosses were blown down, or they were made of wood, so they crumbled after 100 years. Keeping flags at half-mast for the children whose remains have been found at former residential school sites is a matter of honoring the little ones, AFN National Chief Roseanne Archibald said Tuesday. Honoring the little ones. That phrase is not placed within inverted commas. Her comments come after Conservative leader Erin O'Toole said last week that Canadians should be proud to put our flag back up. The flag has remained at half-mast on the Peace Tower and other federal buildings for nearly 3 months. Let's see. Yeah, well, it's been 3 months plus now. For nearly 3 months to mark the finding of unmarked graves on the grounds of former residential schools. I read somewhere that if we kept the flags half-mast every day for every child that we've discovered so far, that the flag would remain at half-mast for something like 11 to 17 years. Flags are not flown at half-mast because someone dies, or that someone died 100 or 120 years ago. In that case, it's true. The flag would always be at half-mast. There's an assumption in all these stories that some sort of mass murder went on, and there is no evidence whatsoever of this. The Assembly of First Nations is an organization that was founded by Ottawa. Yeah, they pay for it all. There's no national unity among Indian tribes, but the Canadian government founded a pressure group so that the Canadian government would deal out more powers and more gibs to the Indians. Yes, and let's have some more inaccurate coverage here. The flags originally were at the end of May after ground-penetrating radar found what was described as the remains of more than 200 children at the site of the former Kamloops Indian Residential School in British Columbia. No evidence of it, none. Shortly afterwards, 751 more unmarked graves were discovered by the Cowessess First Nation in Saskatchewan at another former residential site. We don't know the provenance of these graveyards, who's buried in them, and how they came to die. But I can say with certainty that until the invention of antibiotics, the death rate among young people, children in my country, as it was in the United States, as it was in Great Britain, was shocking. Oh, residential schools, and schools are in scare quotes, were schools in name only, according to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's final report published in 2015. They were schools. That was the whole point. And no, they weren't schools. What did they do all day? Did they just, stick them in rooms and get them to stare at the floor? No, they were taught. Because the governments at the time believed that Indian education would have to be radically improved for Indians to be able to survive in the new Canada. But no good deed goes unpunished, as they say. This is from Ian Young, the South China Morning Post. Canada Tax Agency reveals secret study linking home prices to millionaire migration 5 years after Freedom of Information request. The 1996 study found rich migrants made more than 90% of luxury purchases in 2 Vancouver municipalities while declaring refugee-level incomes. A Freedom of Information expert said the study could have swayed the city's notoriously unaffordable housing market, and delaying its release was a tragedy. Practically everything associated with immigration in my country, well, immigration from Asia, from 1960s and 1970s is fake up to this day. It is all lies. The documents confirm the Canada Revenue Agency knew 25 years ago that wealth migration and foreign money were playing a vast role in Vancouver's luxury housing market, and that government millionaire migration schemes appeared connected to systematic tax abuse, with participants declaring refugee-level incomes. But the process was allowed to continue for decades before the lucrative immigration programs behind the phenomenon were halted in recent years for the reasons identified by auditors so long before. The programs were dominated by Hong Kongers and Taiwanese in the 1990s, then mainland Chinese millionaires from about 2001. This is from Dan Fumano at the Vancouver Sun. It's a pretty funny story. Eyes of the entire country on Vancouver Glanville. And Liberal candidate has a bit of explaining to do, because the Liberal Party has been talking about affordable housing, and they don't mean a word of it. They don't mean a word of it. The Liberal candidate for Vancouver Granville is called Talib Noor Mohammed. Last week, News 1130 reported that he had quickly bought and sold 4 Vancouver homes in the last 4 months for an apparently tidy profit, just as the Liberals were campaigning on promises to crack down on real estate speculation and flipping to cool, overheated housing markets. And this is from CBC Radio. Measures to make housing more affordable won't be popular with voters, says economist. Building more homes is key, but could devalue existing properties. Let's do the old Control F. Immigration does not appear in this story. We're having over 1.2 million people, newcomers, permanent newcomers to Canada in the next 3 years, and they have to live somewhere, don't they? But no, the CBC is not going to mention immigration in this story. Canadians have been priced out of their own communities, their own cities by foreigners. But apparently, people, well, I suppose boomers and older Gen Xers, they are now able to use their homes as ATM machines. So they are happy with what has happened. Let's go to the chat. Hello to Me Too, Red Sulfur, Head McNeck, Random Number Generator, Anrun, SB. There was something I had to work through yesterday. That's why there wasn't a show. I know this has happened several times before. Hello to Seraphim Goose, William Hicks, Palmcasso 88. Ed McNeck says Mondays are Kevin's new bingo nights. Hello to Dawn from Beyond, Dan Gamion. MeTV's Monday night lineup is particularly good, says Anran. Well, it's the same lineup as, the other days of the week. I don't like MASH or Happy Days or Hogan's Heroes or Gomer Pyle. That's the sort of thing that they play during the evenings. Perry Mason doesn't come on till 11:30. Chogokin 666 says, watching the U.S. mouthpieces talking tough is really indicative of the hubris, nemesis, pathos railway, if that's the correct progression. Yes, I'm going to talk about the children. Don from Beyond says, I saw an Alex Berenson novel for 50 cents at the used book place, so I snagged it. Okay, I haven't read any of his novels. He's an Edgar Award-winning novel That's a pretty prestigious award. Ed McNeck says, bad weekend, motorcycle stolen from my front porch. The bastards pushed it around the corner and went at it with a drill and crowbar, trying to hotwire it. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. 3 pages in and I'm already hooked, said Dawn from Beyond. Jim Edwards says Jagmeet Singh, isn't his real name Jimmy Dhaliwal? Well, there's some confusion about this. That was taken off Wikipedia some time ago. Dhaliwal is a very popular Sikh name. Singh, of course, means lion, and all Sikhs must have the name lion in their name somewhere. It would seem that he changed the way he styled himself from Jimmy Dhaliwal to Jagmeet Singh because he wanted to appear more Sikh, which is a funny way of winning more voters in Canada. And, of course, the lurid turbans, the long, straggly beard, the glittering eyes that make him look like a cartoon villain, they don't help either. Who else do we have here? Tulsa, Oklahoma is where Ed McNeck is. Choking 666 says the premier of St. Lucia was pelted with rocks at an anti-lockdown protest. He got domed pretty severely. Don from Beyond says, my 7-year-old grandson sent home from school on Friday because he was coughing. He has swimmer's cough from the pool. He can't go back until we supply a negative COVID test. We are livid, and quite rightly so. Just going to adjust this. Is that better? Or did I go too high? No, that's good. Hello to Moral Outrage Prophet, Vancouver. Kevin, aren't you ready to build back better? I don't really know what that means, except that as far as I can tell, it means that everything that you thought was normal is no longer going to be normal. Okay. Hello. Okay. John S. Hello. 1467 Masterson Wilson. Don from Beyond says, my other daughter-in-law is going to homeschool, but the second grader's mother says she can't. Yeah, Head, I'm trying to figure out a plan of action. His parents did a test at Walgreens, and it's negative. How much does a test cost, says Buddy. The tests are all free, is my understanding. Hello to Red Sulfur and Kontiki Roulette. And it's not half-mast, it's half-staff. It's unless it's on a ship, says Ed McNeck. Thank you for that. Chokin 666 says, so our president dozed off on camera, check his watch, observing a solemn ceremony, and called a black man boy. The last part was pretty embarrassing. As far as him checking his watch, I've seen it argued, which seems reasonable enough, that there were a lot of ceremonies he had to get to, and these were being staged. One after the other. But I don't know. Couldn't you have a staffer who could keep track of time for you? 1467 Masterson Wilson says, Foodie Stop Epicurious has announced that they will not publish any further ground beef recipes. They are harmful to the planet. The world is insane, I tells you. KMG says, can you enjoy Perry Mason knowing Burr was gay? I don't know. I guess I learned about this decades ago, and I just sort of put it out of my mind. He seems pretty butch on the show. Matt Forney. Hello, Matt, and thank you for what you sent me earlier today. I greatly appreciate it. I won't read what Matt has said, but I will say this, that this marriage of his, this recent marriage of his, as far as I could tell, it was a genuine arranged marriage. Kevin, would you cover Glenn Ross for Theater Thursday? That's an excellent suggestion. Okay, let's get back to it here. And we'll talk about something which is both stupid and horrible. This is from Business Insider. John Halterwanger. A U.S. drone strike killed 10 Afghan civilians in Kabul Sunday. The U.S. and its allies has killed thousands of civilians since the war began. Yeah, I was just thinking about people are calling Aaron O'Toole compassionate conservative. Oh, like George W. Bush. And of course, shortly after George W. Bush became president, he started killing hundreds of thousands of Iraqis and Afghans. The U.S. and its allies have killed tens of thousands of civilians since the war began in 2001. From U.S. drone strikes in Afghanistan, it's estimated between 4,126 to 10,076 have been killed since 2004. Yeah, the Pentagon said, yeah, we took out some ISIS bigwigs. Who were they? We're not going to tell you. 7 children were killed in this attack. The strike targeted a vehicle the U.S. military said was filled with explosives set to be used in an ISIS-K attack. The Pentagon said it's aware of reports of civilian casualties, but maintained that the strike disrupted an imminent ISIS-K threat to Hamid Karzai International Airport. We know that there were substantial and powerful subsequent explosions resulting from the destruction of the vehicle, indicating a large amount of explosive material inside that may have caused additional casualties. It is unclear what may have happened, and we are investigating further. Captain Bill Urban, a spokesperson for U.S. Central Command, said in a statement, adding that the U.S. would be deeply saddened by any potential loss of innocent life. Does anyone believe that? Deeply saddened? I'm okay. So, you had the bombings at the airport. So the United States is getting out, get a little payback, and maybe your human intelligence could have little bit better for this postscript. I don't know how long Joe Biden is going to survive. I mean, they've got him speaking almost every day now, and Joe Biden doesn't speak. I'll say a few things and then disappear back into the basement. This is from Ace of Spades, Biden's speech aftermath, and Jen, not Jennifer, but Jen Psaki cleaning up after the drooling imbecile. Some commentary on Biden's speech. Biden always does the same thing when this demented, old, slurring, lisping fool wants to sound tough. He just yells. I think his handlers believe his lisping and slurring are less pronounced when he's yelling like an old lunatic. 90% of Americans who wanted to leave have been evacuated. Biden says, yay, 90%, that's an A-. Out. That was my call, and the buck stops with me. In. This was Trump's idea, This is a great point from John Nolte. Biden is claiming simultaneously that this is a great success and also blaming Trump for the failure. What? Shockingly, Biden dared to bring up Beau Biden again, someone who was not ever in combat and who did not die in battle. Though in a very David French-like way, he likes to bring up Beau's service in a way that suggests he was a combat infantryman rather than an REMF lawyer sitting in an air-conditioned office prosecuting U.S. soldiers for being AWOL or drunk. No, not a good day. Another very, very bad day for the Biden administration. Jim Kunstler wrote yesterday, for all the seeming power of the deep state, aka the intel community, one really has to be impressed by its stupidity and desperation. It can't keep secrets or cover its tracks. Anyone who's paying attention to the Russiagate operation has seen the published evidence of all the lawless behavior it spawned and knows the names of all the players. Ditto, the effort to engineer the 20... I can't say that. And I can't say that either. Yet this deep state rogue menace is stumbling badly now because it didn't figure out the basic dynamic of the long emergency, that overinvestments in complexity inexorably produce disorder and collapse. This includes the complexity of the deep state itself, a sprawling enterprise choking on the immense stream of data it feeds on and the fumbling effects of its all too human agents to weaponize all that. The question now is whether the deep state will collapse and perhaps even get forcefully defeated by Americans who oppose it before the entire country and all its support systems collapse. Events are on the loose well beyond the deep state's control now. Its frontman, Joe Biden, sealed his fate last week with the bungled exit from Afghanistan. 13 dead U.S. soldiers may only be a preview of a grand guignol to come as the victorious Islamic maniacs get to stage atrocities, throwing the thousands of Americans and other Westerners left behind. Why wouldn't they? For decades, they promised to defeat and humiliate their infidel enemies. Remember the video recorded beheadings of Nicholas Berg, Daniel Pearl, and many others, the roasting of this captured Syrian pilot in a steel cage. There's no need to even ask the rhetorical question who planned and executed the buggered-up evacuation of Kabul. It is self-evident, the entire chain of command. This is finally galvanizing half the country, not enthralled to the deep state, to move against it. And that's what you'll see in the weeks to come. They will get rid of this imposter, Joe Biden, if the deep state doesn't try to do it first. And then they will cancel the deep state's attempt to manage any succession to the vacancy at the top. And then he has something to say about COVID-19 and the terror. We will not submit. We're nearing the end of this medical reign of terror. The trouble is the medical establishment won't survive it. They perverted and undermined what used to be called science, truth-driven inquiry into what's real and what is not. And anyway, the medical system had already poisoned itself with racketeering so outlandish and cruel that it makes the old mafia look like a charity organization. Not only do Americans get a COVID virus whose development was funded and guided by America's chief public health official, but if it puts them in the hospital, their doctors deny them treatment with efficacious medicines, and if the patients happen to survive the ordeal, they're hit up with million-dollar bills. This conduct exhibits a kind of sadism that goes beyond just adding insult to injury. And, this is quite a good essay from Revolver.news, which is a fine website. It's called General H.R. McMaster Reveals Deep State's Coded Language While Responding to Afghanistan Terrorist Attack. There was only one fitting response to last week's heart-wrenching suicide bombing at Hamid Karzai International Airport in Kabul. America must get out of Afghanistan as quickly as possible and stay out for good. Nothing good has come of America's involvement in Afghanistan, and nothing more will come out of it except more flag-draped coffins. Sickeningly, the U.S. security state responded to last Thursday's attack with a borderline glee. Sadly, ISIS-K's gruesome attack served the forever war lobby perfectly, as it used the tragedy to launch a final Hail Mary bid to prolong America's interminable objective-free crusade in Southwest Asia. In the process, the globalist war lobby revealed one of the most cynical, sinister components of a playbook it has run for 2 decades. A playbook that capitalizes on public ignorance to conflate wildly different groups and oversell totally unproven claims in the service of perpetuating endless warfare. ISIS-K immediately claimed credit for Thursday's attack, and there's no reason to doubt it. Yet even before authorities released an official body count, former NSA H.A. McMaster announced his choice of culprit, the Taliban, either acting alone or in direct concert with ISIS. Richard Hanania commented, McMaster says he'll find out that the Taliban knew about the airport attack. When that proves false, will he be asked about it? Will Andrea Mitchell stop giving him platform, or will he just be invited on next time to keep lying? The Occidental jihadist said, H.R. McMaster said on Fox News, that I wouldn't be surprised if ISIS-K attack was just a straw man, a front for the Taliban. So the years of open acrimony between the two is a mirage. Come on, man. For DC Warhawks, no doubt it's easy to imagine Taliban and ISIS teaming up. They're both bad guys, right? Bad guys work together. That's how it works in comic book movies, subliterate America's primary cultural lens for making sense of the world. In reality, of course, the Taliban and ISIS are bitter foes. Even as the Taliban steadily took over more and more of Afghanistan, it also waged against the country's ISIS militants, often with tacit approval and even outright assistance from the United States. When the Taliban seized Kabul, one of its first actions was to execute former ISIS leader Omar Khorasani, who was imprisoned there. ISIS and the Taliban disagree in terms of mission tactics and basic interpretations of Islam. Their rivalry isn't a passive one, but one that involves numerous gruesome atrocities. But for H.R. McMaster making the case for endless war on TV, they're all just one and the same, folded neatly under some cable-friendly banner like Islamo-fascism. After all, George W. Bush only learned about the existence of Sunni and Shia Muslims 2 months before the invasion of Iraq. McMaster went on to declare in a separate BBC interview that this so-called ISIS-K attack has all the hallmarks of a Haqqani network attack, referring to an Afghan militia that is an offshoot of the Taliban. How would McMaster know that the attack had these hallmarks? Is there a long history of suicide attacks on besieged airports conducting an evacuation? And why would the Taliban, which resolutely followed a year-long ceasefire with U.S. forces so that they would leave the country, suddenly reverse course and begin murdering them on the cusp of final victory? It seems that it makes no sense because it doesn't. McMaster is a babbling idiot making things up on the fly. His only objective is to flail at one last opportunity to extend America's decades-long war in Afghanistan for a few more years at least. This playbook has been followed over and over again for the entirety of the war on terror. Think back to the fall of 2001, when in the wake of 9/11, Americans lived in fear of follow-up attacks after 9/11. As if on cue, the anthrax letters began, and of course the American experts were to say that the letters had all the hallmarks. This is exact quotation, by the way, of a terror attack planned by Saddam Hussein's Iraq. And that quote is from The Guardian. Let's find all the examples of all of the hallmarks, because it's pretty funny. It is really funny. And you've all seen the videos, right? Let's go to the local news here. And let's have some event or phenomenon described by dozens of them in pretty much exactly the same language. And in February 2003, an Australian lawmaker getting up support for that country's participation in the Iraq War confidently stated that, quote, the stubborn, deceitful behavior of Iraq has all the hallmarks of a nation which is hiding something, unquote. In reality, Iraq had no weapons of mass destruction. And let's go for another one. After 2017, after the chemical blast at Khan Sheikhoun in Syria, it took less than 24 hours for U.S. and allied intelligence services to confidently blame the blast on President Bashar Assad's government. Of course, Assad consistently disclaimed all responsibility. The very next day, Britain's U.S. ambassador said the attack, wait for it, quote, bears all the hallmarks of the Assad regime, unquote. It never made any sense whatsoever that Assad would be responsible for this. And of course, now we have reports from the body which looks into these things which have been suppressed, saying, no, wasn't him. Peter Hitchens has written about this. And the hits just keep on coming. A certain popular phrase kept popping up. This one from Agence France Presse. The US, Britain, and France have argued the alleged attack bears all the hallmarks of a strike ordered by the regime of Russia's ally Assad, which has been blamed for previous attacks by the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. Did it, though? An investigation by this organization said it did, and then a whistleblower promptly accused the organization of issuing a politically motivated finding. Oh, let's see. Hunter Biden. More than 50 former high-ranking U.S. intelligence officials have signed a letter saying that the recent disclosure of emails allegedly belonging to Joe Biden's son, quote, has all the classic earmarks of a Russian information operation, unquote. They don't really try very hard, do they? I guess they figure that these idiots in the media will just swallow anything, and they do. You know the reason why Assad is so hated by the elite? Because he protects Christians. That's why. It's as simple as that. In any conflict between Christians and Muslims, or between Muslims and Buddhists, Muslims and whoever, the elite, including intelligence services, always takes the side of the Muslims against the Christians or the Hindu or the Buddhists or whoever. Every single time. This can't be an accident, can it? This is from Emerald Robinson, a lovely woman, at her Substack, how the National Review sold its soul to Google and why Jonah Goldberg and David French got thrown out. There were rumors in the summer of 2018 that an audio tape was circulating that would send shockwaves through the think tanks of Washington and the conservative intellectual movement in particular. A top Google executive had been recorded telling his fellow employees that Google generously donated to conservative think tanks and magazines to dampen criticism of their anti-conservative bias. In essence, Google was buying off Conservatism Inc. and the GOP establishment to stay silent while Google monitored, harassed, and excluded Trump supporters. If true, the tape sounded like a smoking gun. Incontrovertible evidence of the corruption and double dealing of Conservatism Inc. that would permanently discredit it with Republican voters. I was told that the tape had been offered as an exclusive to the Wall Street Journal. Months went by and nothing happened. There were rumors during this time that big tech lobbyists were trying very hard to get the Wall Street Journal to kill the story. Then I began to get a series of messages from various anonymous sources that the organizations that were guilty of taking Google money to stay silent included the American Enterprise Institute, the Competitive Enterprise Institute, the Cato Institute, CPAC, the Weekly Standard, and the National Review. Finally, I was approached by an insider at one of those think tanks who confirmed the main details. You could say I broke the story since the Wall Street Journal piece had really buried it on Twitter on October the 30th. And Jonah Goldberg was not pleased by this. He responded on Twitter, LOL, love the idea. You have sources. Oh, Jonah Goldberg do a lot of reporting, does he? Goldberg had once again given himself up at the first sign of shooting. On December the 10th, Wired magazine ran a big piece describing the leaked Google audio tape and its significance. On December 13th, Alan Bakari at Breitbart also ran a piece which did not mince words about what Google's money had paid for. Audio recordings obtained by Wire reveal that Google cooperates with and funds a range of establishment conservatives in D.C. that help it fend off scrutiny and oversight from politicians. One of the Google-funded think tanks had its pro-Google op-ed published by National Review. Now the story had legs. Robinson tweeted on December the 14th, it looks like conservative mag National Review was taking Google cash too. To suppress conservative speech on social media, was this something that NRO donors and contributors knew was taking place? Let's ask Jonah Goldberg and David A. French and others today. Do I need to tell you who swallowed the hook and started screaming? On December the 18th, Goldberg did another piece attacking me in the Google story. This article was called Emerald Robinson's Stupid Lies, and it opened with the usual kill the messenger non-denials. You see, dear reader, it's not that the editors of the magazine got caught taking dirty money to hurt their fellow conservatives. It's the crazy people who report this stuff. This opening amounted to an almost blanket denial that the National Review had actually taken any Google money. Realizing at some point that this was in fact not true, Goldberg slipped into the second to last paragraph the following confession. I heard that Google gave some money to the National Review Institute for the Buckley Prize dinner only because I asked about it this week. But that just proves my point. No one is telling anyone what to write or not write. That's a joke. So to sum up Jonah's defense, first, it's absurd to think that any money changed hands. But yes, money did change hands. But nobody could possibly think that such money influenced what we wrote. The problem for Jonah Goldberg was that actually I did have an insider at his magazine who confirmed that National Review editors declined to publish anti-Google articles. Guess how many people from the National Review contracted me to look at the evidence that I have? Zero, zilch, nada. So I basically caught the editors of National Review in bald-faced lies about taking money from big tech companies. But the story gets better. I was hearing from sources close to the National Review board that the loss of donors and subscribers was so serious that drastic action would need to be taken. The magazine had lost about half of its subscriber base in less than 2 years. The board was also adamant that both Jonah Goldberg and David French were the main culprits behind the astonishing collapse of the magazine's influence and that they needed to go. Everybody wanted them off the masthead in order to survive. A month later, Stephen Hayes of the Weekly Standard and Jonah Goldberg announced the launch of their nameless magazine with no investors by sending out tweets on their personal accounts that people could get more info by emailing them. A few years later, they were soliciting strangers to give them $1,500 a year to get a newsletter. I thought that model died decades ago. In February 2019, Axios ran a story about a new conservative media company that didn't even have a name, with the news that Jonah Goldberg would be leaving the National Review in the coming months to join forces with the recently fired Stephen Hayes. Goldberg was very touchy about the idea that he'd been removed from the magazine. He wanted people to know that it was his idea to leave the National Review to fax out a newsletter from his basement with no name and no money, along with Stephen Hayes. The drag queen story hour enthusiast David French even tweeted, "There's news, there's fake news. Then there's the absolute premium grade BS I'm reading on MAGA Twitter and elsewhere, claiming that Jonah Goldberg was pushed out of National Review. Completely, totally false." Yes, of course. Why would he want to leave National Review? The one conservative magazine that everyone has heard of. And I've got this new thing. What's it called? The Bulwark? That's an odd name. People are going to remember that. And but National Review, I remember that. This new thing, what you're calling the bulldozer or something like that, the Bilbo, the Bulwark. Yeah, definitely you want to go that way. Did the editors of the National Review learn anything from this debacle? Of course not. The feckless Rich Lowry recently handed the magazine over to the world's only living Evan McMullen voter, Ramesh Ponnuru, who was absolutely nobody's choice to steer the magazine back to popularity. If anything, Ponnuru represents an even greater slide into snide effeminacy than Lowry, and few thought that was possible. Defeat seems to be the brand for these boys in any culture war. Rich Lowry and the gang have always been the first to stand athwart history, crying, "We surrender first." They've been so weak and defeatist during the Trump years that a year's subscription to the magazine could be marketed as an estrogen supplement. Meanwhile, the funding of the magazine now relies even more heavily on big tech money. The back page of the June 1st, 2021 issue was a full-page Facebook ad. Inside the same issue, in case you missed the point, there was a 2-page ad from Google. National Review didn't bother trying to win back its old subscribers by becoming more conservative. Well, no, just don't. Stop, Emerald. I love your stuff. Stop calling yourself a conservative. Don't accept the label of your enemies. Oh, yes, I really had to smile at this over the weekend. Elizabeth Holmes, you remember her from Theranos, the fraud, the crook, who she had a big security detail because, of course, why wouldn't she? Apparently, because Zuckerberg does. And apparently she was this fabulous looking woman. One, she looks absolutely deranged. And of all of the hundreds or thousands of pictures I saw of her, when, Theranos was going to conquer the world, I thought, does this woman know what hair conditioner is? Has no one told her about that? Reading Bad Blood, the book from the Wall Street Journal reporter about Theranos, which I highly recommend. It's just, you learn right from the very beginning that someone that Holmes had worked with had told her that getting blood from fingertips is no good. It's not going to work because the blood is going to be contaminated by sweat and dirt. Oh, and then she never actually built any of these. They were using Siemens machines instead. But it turns out that Elizabeth Holmes, who's going to trial this week, she has a defense. And what is her defense? Stop picking on me. I'm just a widow girl. Yeah, that's right. The most powerful woman in tech, she was called. But she was bullied by some Asian man. So sad. So sad. You know who else pulled this off? And it actually worked for her? Carla Homolka. No, I'm not saying Elizabeth Holmes isn't a murderer. But Karla Homolka, oh, there was a very bad man. My husband, he turned me into a rapist and a murderer. And people bought it. Karla Homolka served 12 years in prison. Of course, her ex-husband is going to spend the rest of his life in prison. There is no question about that. But Karla Homolka, she was just a widow girl, too. And I'm going to talk about Alex Berenson. But first, let's go to the chat. Enron says, I'm sure a lot of other okay. Steve says, Holmes and Theranos. Holy crap, I forgot about that circus. Yeah, she conned George Shultz, who had always believed to be a smart man, and a whole bunch of other people right at the top. They just, I don't know, maybe they fell in love with her mad blue eyes. Enron, who is the second Mrs. Mamet? Rebecca Pidgeon, the Scottish actress and singer. I know a lot of people don't like Rebecca Pidgeon, but I'm quite fond of her. Oh, David Wright says, watch that deep voice she cultivated. Go away at trial. Yes, that's a good one. Good one, David. So who was that? Professor Ford, Christine Blasey Ford? When I saw her testify, she doesn't really talk like that. Does she? Come on. Come on, she can't. People would be laughing at her. But then the Minister of Finance of my country, who was formerly a senior executive with Thomson Reuters, and Deputy Prime Minister, and I first saw her on the McLaughlin group. And, oh yes, she has this. Desperate to absolve her Nazi collaborator grandfather. She was Minister of Foreign Affairs, and I got the impression that this silly woman, Chrystia Freeland, was determined to somehow get Canada into a war with Russia because she thinks that history has not been kind to her Nazi collaborator grandfather. Rebecca Pidgeon, yes, was Homolka an inspiration for Gone Girl? There's something that happened to Karla Homolka shortly before this, everybody got arrested, that her husband, Paul Bernardo, supposedly beat her about the head very badly indeed. And there are gruesome photographs of the results of this beating. I've never bought it. Never bought it for a second. Picasso 88 says she's also wearing her hair down to look more feminine. At least we know National Review isn't racist because a brown man is running the show, says Rustin Shockford. I haven't seen you around for a while. What was it that the late Sam Francis said? Yes, they were all going to have to force to listen to the advice about America from the latest Indian that it's imported. Goldberg was tripped up by a tape. Irony, said Emmett Kelly's Earth. Of course, that's a reference to his mother's involvement in the Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky scandal. Lindsay Krause, if you look at the difference between her in Slapshot and then when she is in the first David Mamet movie that she appeared in, House of Games, you'd hardly know it was the same woman. Really kind of shocking. They never list these hallmarks, or if they do, they're all generalities. In 2001, the American said the earmarks of the British version aired as all the hallmarks of. I saw a video recently of Mamet citing The Sixth Sense as an example of an ending that changes everything that came before. That's what he aims for. Yeah. I wasn't all that fond of the last movie he did, which is about Phil Spector. It had Al Pacino in it, and the over-the-top Al Pacino is not my favorite thing. That was for HBO. It wasn't a theatrical release, and I suppose it was about that time that his book on politics came out. And so we're not seeing any more movies from David Mamet. The Afghan war was like buying drinks for the ugliest girl in the bar. Nothing good can come of this, says No Use. Yes, Rebecca Pigeon was in The Spanish Prisoner with Steve Martin, who I thought was quite good in it, actually, and Campbell Scott, who I liked so much from Cameron Crowe's movie about Seattle grunge singles. Is that what it's called? Metal Mike has a rumor here, which I'm not going to repeat. Yikes, Marion Boyd. Yeah, I remember her. You know, there was a publication ban on almost everything to do with Carla Homolka's trial. I had to pretty much yell at the people who worked at the radio station I worked at. You're saying things that she did. You know, going to details about things that she's accused of. You're not allowed to say that. You could be criminally sanctioned for that. And Canada takes this sort of thing very seriously. Okay, let's talk about Alex Berenson. He'd been warning for weeks, for months, that he was going to be banned from Twitter, and he's been banned permanently from Twitter. This is from Toby Young. Leading lockdown skeptic Alex Berenson, a former New York Times science reporter, has been permanently suspended from Twitter following a tweet pointing out some of the limitations of the COVID vaccines last week. I'm not going to repeat. The tweet is repeated everywhere, but I'm not going to do so on this forum for a reason that you know. Berenson's account was banned Saturday after repeated violations of the rules, a Twitter spokesperson told NBC News. Berenson, a one-time New York Times reporter, addressed the suspension in a Saturday night post to his Substack page, blaming his removal from Twitter on a recent post where he was critical of the coronavirus vaccine. And again, I'm not going to repeat what he said, but it's easy enough to find. Someone who does not like Alex Berenson is someone called Justin Baragona of the Daily Beast. Tucker offers to fund COVID grifter Alex Berenson's Twitter lawsuit. Berenson has made the argument that this tweet that got him permanently suspended, that there is nothing untrue in it. Which is an interesting defense, but truth is not particularly important in questions of this kind anymore. Alex Berenson, the former NYT reporter who became the pandemic's wrongest man. Oh, is that what everyone was calling him? There's this fellow at The Atlantic who was on at him. Oh, there's a reference to this guy. He looks pretty stupid, this fellow from The Atlantic now. Thompson, I believe his name is. Suggested Monday night that he would sue Twitter for banning his account for repeatedly violating the platform's COVID-19 misinformation policy. And Fox News host Tucker Carlson not only urged the self-professed COVID contrarian to sue the crap out of the social media site, but he also offered to fund Berenson's potential lawsuit. Over the weekend, Berenson was permanently suspended. Yes, we knew that, after building up a massive following on the platform by peddling skepticism. Oh, is that a bad thing? Skepticism? And misinformation. Yes, misinformation from Justin Baragona at the Daily Beast, they have a godlike relationship to the truth, apparently. The ex-reporter turned spy novelist, is that a bad thing? Parlayed his COVID-19 trutherism. Oh, trutherism. Oh, I get it. It's like he's saying that 9/11 something or other. Into frequent Fox News appearances. Boo! Book sales. No, that is not true. Berenson's book on COVID-19 has not yet been released, and it won't be released until the autumn. And a rapidly growing Substack subscriber base. Well, you can get most of his stuff on Substack for free. He's not that much of a grifter. When you give away stuff for free. And so they've silenced Alex Berenson, and creeps like those who write for the Daily Beast are quite pleased by that, because there's only one opinion. You can't have any more than one opinion allowed, because then people would have the ability to choose. This is from the Wrap. Vaccine skeptic Alex Berenson says wealthy people have offered aid after Twitter ban. I'm certainly glad to hear it. And I mentioned Substack. Here's the latest from 8 hours ago. The two leading FDA vaccine reviewers are quitting. Gee, I wonder why. In a major blow to vaccine efforts, senior FDA leaders stepping down, reports Zachary Brennan. Luciana Borio, MD, tweeted, the FDA is losing two giants who helped bring us many safe and effective vaccines over decades of public service. And the two are Marion Gruber and Phil Krause. Berenson comments, don't worry, though. You can be confident that this has nothing to do with political pressure to push boosters or vaccines for kids or the full approval, in scare quotes, that came last week. Nothing to see here, folks. No, indeed. Nothing to see. Okay. Chase Bank cancels General Mike Flynn's credit cards. This is from Tyler Durden at Zero Hedge. Chase Bank has canceled General Mike Flynn's personal credit card, citing, quote, possible reputational risk to our country. Sorry, to our company. Oh, really? So, the Coca-Cola company doesn't like the opinions of certain people. They're going to refuse to sell Coke to them. We wouldn't want our brand associated with you, with all the possible reputational risks. In case there was any doubt what is happening in this country, says Regina Hicks. Yes, indeed. Chase Bank canceled General Flynn's personal credit card over reputation risk, boycott Chase. JP Morgan Chase and Company agrees to pay $920 million in connection with schemes to defraud precious metals and U.S. Treasury markets. As Matt Taibbi pointed out several years ago, when you look at the number of fines that have been levied against JP Morgan Chase, what is it? It's over $15 billion now. That is essentially a criminal enterprise. And the stupendous amounts it pays in fines are just a cost of business. So what's coming up next? You don't get any electricity because, Edison, the Edison company, we're worried about possible reputational risk. You don't get any gas to heat your apartment. No, we're not going to let you buy groceries either. Is that coming? I would not be surprised. Apparently, these people have all the confidence in the world because they are not worried about blowback from this. At the site justthenews.com, oh yeah, let's just a second here. No, it stopped. And the Gateway Pundit has also been hammered. Actually, I had no idea the Gateway Pundit was so popular. Yes, Google demonetized the Gateway Pundit from its ad network. The Gateway Pundit is ranked in the top 200 of U.S. websites, according to Alexa, and in the top 50 of English language websites, according to a study prepared for media industry news site Press Gazette. Google demonetized the Gateway Pundit from their ad network, the site's founder and editor Jim Hoft reported Saturday. We're emailing you to let you know that we've repeatedly found content on one of your sites that violates our Google publisher policies. The search giant notified Gateway Pundit's legal department. As a result, we'll be disabling ad serving on the site in 4 business days. In explaining its move, Google cited 2 categories of violations: dangerous or derogatory content and misrepresentative, unreliable, and harmful claims. And I've told you before how much I like this site, the Conservative Woman, conservativewoman.co.uk. It's a lot of men write on it too. There's a story by Harry Hopkins called COVID, a brilliant way of transferring money from the poor to the rich. So this fellow describes He's in Yorkshire, and he goes to McDonald's to get tea. As we sat down near the cordoned-off staff rest area with our 99p cups of PG tips, one smart young man got up from his seat, donned a mask, and walked toward the kitchen. "Excuse me," I ventured. "I hope you don't think me impolite, but I was wondering how the staff are coping wearing those masks all day long." The ice was broken. The chap turned out to be a senior employee, and we had a fantastic exchange. It turns out that McDonald's keep their mask policy under constant review. Staff are allowed an input, and every 4 weeks or so, the guidelines may be changed. This manager was well aware of the dangers of masks, both short-term and long-term, and dropped his muzzle to show me a rash all around his mouth with the words, "I'm not the only one suffering from this." He then told me about the stocks of masks the Knaresborough branch carried in their storeroom, and I had to ask him to repeat it because to me it seemed unbelievable. "We have 50,000 masks. They are in batches of 100 and boxes of 500, and we have a room full." I asked how many masks each employee would get through in a day, and he said they usually wore only one per shift, but could get another if the first became dirty. I didn't query the definition of dirty. I wished him well, and he thanked me for my interest. I really couldn't get my head around this number of 50,000. Knaresborough isn't that big a branch, but it got me thinking. McDonald's has 1,250 branches in the UK, and worldwide there are more than 38,000 outlets serving 69 million people every day. If every branch has a stockpile of 50,000 masks, that equates to 62.5 million in the UK and 1.9 billion across the world. And don't forget, we are talking about only one company. Can you imagine the mega numbers involved when you consider the restaurant and takeaway industry across the globe using these face nappies? And can you comprehend the numbers of masks finding their way from China to all parts of the planet to support this demand on the back of COVID? And where are these masks destined to end up? During our short visit, we visited Bampton Cliffs near Bridlington, a premier nesting grounds for gannets and other seabirds in the UK. One of the information boards provided by the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds explained how the population of fulmars was seriously in decline because of the numbers of plastic bags polluting the oceans. Apparently, the fulmars can't tell the difference between their shrimp-like food and plastic bags and ingest them with fatal results. Well, in terms of global pollution, we ain't seen nothing yet. It wouldn't surprise me if the number of discarded masks is becoming so serious that the Earth may be in danger of tilting on its axis. An exaggeration maybe, but here's the obvious question. Where is David Attenborough when you need him? Is it any wonder that in 2020, COVID-related goods and services made 40 new billionaires, that they joined 2,168 existing billionaires in the world, China heading the list with 819. Of course, I see masks discarded everywhere, and I'm sure you do. There's a piece from Australia, from The Spectator, by Terry Barnes. "Zero COVID is wishful thinking if Australia wants to rejoin the world." Well, that rather begs the question, doesn't it? Does Australia want to rejoin the world? Doesn't seem so. Currently, Greater Sydney and Melbourne and regional New South Wales and Victoria are in various degrees of lockdown. Some of Sydney and all of Melbourne are under nighttime curfew, something that has never occurred in Australia before, even under threat of Japanese invasion in 1942. Even lockdown permitted exercise walks in the early spring sun are decreed antisocial. A week ago, Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews said angrily, "Today is going to be a nice day, but stay at home. Otherwise, there'll be a lot of Sundays spent in hospital." Yeah, okay. They've all gone completely mad there. Well, you know, as Berenson likes to say, virus gonna virus. Let's go to the Daily Skeptic. And apparently Boris Johnson is going ahead with his vaccine passport. In 14 days, my own province of BC will have a vaccine passport, despite which will affect Vancouver Island, of course, despite the fact that I believe that fewer than 30 people have died on the entire island in more than a year and a half. And there are about 800,000 people here. It's a pinprick, is what it is. Has there been a rise in non-COVID-related heart attacks since the vaccine rollout? Durham University is offering incoming students £5,000 to defer entry for a year. And Leeds University is offering law and business students £10,000 in free accommodation to defer their places. Almost 250,000 children prescribed antidepressants in 2020, and this makes me angrier than I can express. In case there was any doubt about the impact of numerous long-lasting lockdowns on the youngest in society, new NHS figures have revealed that record numbers of antidepressants are being prescribed to children, with almost 232,000 prescribed to children aged between 5 and 16 in 2020 alone. Long waiting lists for mental health services caused in part by lockdowns have certainly added to the population. And as we have previously reported, many people who have been able to receive treatment over the course of the lockdowns still feel as if they missed out on proper care due to the loss of face-to-face appointments. For some, video calls made matters worse. Mary Boosted, the hard-left General Secretary of the National Education Union, has warned that inadequate safety procedures in schools ahead of reopening will inevitably mean major disruption in the weeks ahead. In an interview with the Telegraph yesterday, she gave a strong hint that the NEU and the other teaching unions will soon be demanding school closures again and blaming the government. Is this the woman who she didn't want the members doing Zoom education as well? And okay, let's move on to Joseph Tainter and his book from 1988, The Collapse of Complex Societies. By virtue of their territorial extensiveness, states are often differentiated not only economically but also culturally and ethnically. Despite an institutionalized authority structure, an ideological basis, and a monopoly of force, the rulers of states share at least one thing with chiefs and big men: the need to establish and constantly reinforce a legitimacy. In complex as well as simpler societies, leadership activities and societal resources must be continuously devoted to this purpose. Hierarchy and complexity, as noted, are rare in human history, and where present require constant reinforcement. No societal leader is ever far from the need to validate position and policy, and no hierarchical society can be organized without explicit provision for this need. Legitimacy is the belief of the populace and the elites that rule is proper and valid, and that the political world is as it should be. It pertains to individual rulers, to decisions, to broad policies, to parties, and to entire forms of government. The support that members are willing to extend to a political system is essential for its survival. Decline in support will not lead necessarily to the fall of a regime, for to a certain extent, coercion can replace commitment to ensure compliance. Coercion, though, is a costly, ineffective strategy which can never be completely or permanently successful. Even with coercion, decline in popular support below some critical minimum leads inevitably to political failure. Establishing moral validity is a less costly and more effective approach. Complex societies are focused on a center which may not be located physically where it is literally implied, but which is the symbolic source of the framework of society. It is not only the location of legal and governmental institutions, but is the source of order and the symbol of moral authority and social continuity. The center partakes of the nature of the sacred. In this sense, every complex society has an official religion. The moral authority and sacred aura of the center not only are essential in maintaining complex societies, but were crucial in their emergence. One critical impediment to the development of complexity in stateless societies was the need to integrate many localized autonomous units, which would each have their own peculiar interests, feuds, and jealousies. A ruler drawn from any of these units is automatically suspect by the others, who rightly fear favoritism towards his/her natal group and locality, particularly in dispute resolution. This problem has crippled many modern African nations. The solution to this structural limitation was to explicitly link leadership in early complex societies to the supernatural. When a leader is imbued with an aura of sacred neutrality, his identification with natal group and territory can be superseded by ritually sanctioned authority, which rises above purely local concerns. An early complex society is likely to have an avowedly sacred basis of legitimacy, in which disparate, formally independent groups are united by an overarching level of shared ideology, symbols, and cosmology. Supernatural sanctions are then a response to the stresses of change from a kin-based society to a class-structured one. They may be necessitated in part by an ineffective concentration of coercive force in emerging complex societies. Sacred legitimization provides a binding framework until real vehicles of power have been consolidated. Once this has been achieved, the need for religious integration declines, and indeed conflict between secular and sacred authorities may therefore ensue. Yet, as noted, the sacred aura of the center never disappears, not even in contemporary secular governments. Astute politicians have always exploited this fact. It is a critical element in the maintenance of legitimacy. Despite the undoubted power of supernatural legitimization, support for leadership must also have a genuine material basis. Easton suggests that legitimacy declines mainly under conditions of what he calls output failure. Output failure occurs where authorities are unable to meet the demands of the support population or do not take anticipatory actions to counter adversities. Outputs can be political or material. Output expectations are continuous and impose on the leadership a never-ending need to mobilize resources to maintain support. The attainment and perpetuation of legitimacy thus requires more than the manipulation of ideological symbols. They require the assessment and commitment of real resources at satisfactory levels and are a genuine cost that any complex society must bear. Legitimacy is a recurrent factor in the modern study of the nature of complex societies and is pertinent to understanding their collapse. The next section is titled Levels of Complexity, and we will return to that on Wednesday. There is quite a good, though long piece at Harper's by Joseph Bernstein called Bad News, Selling the Story of Disinformation. Of course, misinformation, disinformation, it's become a racket now. We are the boys and girls that are going to tell you what's true and not true. Not is true. And because we have that power, we have arrogated to ourselves that power. Let's look at the Aspen Institute. What is to be done with all the bad content? In March, the Aspen Institute announced that it would convene an exquisitely nonpartisan Commission on Information Disorder, co-chaired with Katie Couric. Katie Couric is, this is my opinion, not the author's. She is not only exquisitely stupid, she is also exceedingly short. When she was on the co-host of the Today Show, she had to be boosted into her seat, her chair, by staffers. I am not making this up. So this commission would deliver recommendations for how the country can respond to this modern-day crisis of faith in key institutions. The 15 commissioners include Yasmin Green, the Director of Research and Development for Jigsaw, a technology incubator within Google that explores threats to open societies. Gary Kasparov, the chess champion and Kremlin critic. Alex Stamos, formerly Facebook's chief security officer and now the director of the Stanford Internet Observatory. Catherine Murdoch, Rupert Murdoch's estranged daughter-in-law, and Prince Harry, Prince Charles's estranged son. Among the Commission's goals is to determine how government, private industry, and civil society can work together to engage disaffected populations who have lost faith in evidence-based reality. Remember when I just read from Tainted there about coercion? This is what we are talking about here. Yes, faith being a well-known prerequisite for evidence-based reality, as Bernstein says. The Commission on Information Disorder is the latest and most creepily named addition to a new field of knowledge production that emerged during the Trump years at the juncture of media, academia, and policy research. Big Disinfo, a kind of EPO for content. It seeks to expose the spread of various sorts of toxicity on social media platforms, the downstream effects of this spread, and the platform's clumsy, dishonest, and half-hearted attempts to halt it. As an environmental cleanup project, it presumes a harm model of content consumption. Just as, say, smoking causes cancer, consuming bad information must cause changes in belief or behaviors that are bad by some standard. Otherwise, why care what people read and watch? Big Disinfo has found energetic support from the highest echelons of the American political center, which have been warning of an existential content crisis more or less constantly since 2016. To take the only most recent example, in May, Hillary Clinton told the former Tory leader, Lord Haig, that there must be a reckoning by the tech companies for the role that they play in undermining the information ecosystem that is absolutely essential for the functioning of any democracy. You see how this works? How do you know when democracy is not functioning properly? Because Hillary Clinton loses an election or Brexit wins. It really is as simple as that. The world's moving very fast with regard to changes in sexual morality, and this story, it's hard to believe, but it's true. This is from Libby Evans at the Post Millennial. NBC contributor Noah Berlatsky is now the communications director for Prostasia. Doesn't that sound like, is this what I have, Prostasia? I mean, how many times am I going to have to get up in the middle of the night to pee? Can't you give me something for this? Prostasia, a not-for-profit group that is reportedly attempting to legitimize pedophilia under the guise of helping children. As part of his work with the group, he has written about legitimizing trans children, conducted interviews about the positive impact on pornography on children, and how the best way to help children who are trafficked into the sex trade is to decriminalize the sex industry. Prostasia offers pedophiles a MAP support club. MAP stands for Minor Attracted Persons, which is a peer support chat for minor attractive people who are fundamentally against child sex abuse and committed to never harm children, and as a safe space to have peer support in times of trouble. The group is for people who are aged 13 and up. Prostasia bills itself as a new kind of child protection organization that has a different approach to protecting children than the current methods of social work and law enforcement, saying that these approaches are less effective than they should be because they are driven by emotion rather than evidence. That is one that involves embracing those that are self-identified pedophiles. The idea is that with support, these minor attracted persons can be committed to never offending. Timothy N. Fury, writing for Prostasia, says that for pedophiles, the most common struggle is not with child sexual abuse images, and that many of these people are looking for recommendations on where to get professional help. While Fury writes that some minor attracted people do struggle with viewing sexually harmful images, and they are provided with support needed to stop. And for Fury, this is personal. These people are not the majority of us, he writes. No, the majority of us struggle with basic mental health issues, some diagnosed, some not, and just need a place to talk about things they feel they can never talk to friends and family members about. Many of these minor attractive people are children themselves. Fury's piece is just one in defense of pedophilia as a predilection. Berlatsky previously wrote that pedophiles are essentially a stigmatized group. Certain people get designated as deviants, but people hate them. That's from February 2017. Berlatsky promotes the work of UC Berkeley lecturer Alexander Lutnick, writing, quote, "Most young people who trade sex don't see themselves as victims," Lutnick emphasizes. They often see themselves as resourceful individuals who are doing what they need to survive in different circumstances, unquote. He has written that fascists love accusing people of pedophilia because it's an explosive accusation linked historically to queer people and Jewish people and sex workers. Oh, I get it, Noah. So if you're going to be angry with me for attempting to legitimize pedophilia, I'm going to accuse you of being an anti-Semite. Well, we'll see how that works out for him. Fash, he wrote, well, just recently, Love accusing people of pedophilia is explosive accusation linked historically to queer people and Jewish people and sex workers, and also because they know using the term doesn't actually reduce violence and abuse of power, which they like. Oh, you see, we're the bad people here. Berlatsky writes for Prostasia that there's an issue with the term trafficking itself, saying that it conflates underage people trading sex, consensual sex work, immigration, and all kinds of labor exploitation in all industries. He claims that to use the word trafficking for child sex trafficking is a, quote, deliberately obfuscating term, which is basically designed to target sex workers rather than labor exploitation, unquote. Berlatsky has said that parents are tyrants. Parent is an oppressive class, like rich people or white people. Yes, and I'm sure that these children would be much better off under the tender mercies of Noah Berlatsky. There are things you can do, Berlatsky writes, to minimize the abuse that's endemic to the parent-child relationship, but it's always there. Writing for 4W, Anna Slatz explains that Prostasia sees the threat pedophiles pose to children as a bogeyman dressed up by the alt-right, while condemning anti-pedophile sentiment as harmful Nazi-like rhetoric, which requires mass censorship across social media. And Andy No, the writer, took it up with Berlatsky. High-profile blue-check writer Noah Berlatsky is now serving as the communications director for Prostasia. I wrote about a breakdown of this group and its disturbing history for 4W. Yes, Matt Taibbi said something on Twitter, something like, can someone explain this Berlatsky business to me? Because again, what this is happening, this fresh hell is now becoming real. It shouldn't surprise anyone. The elite, the media, has been working to legitimize pedophilia for decades. I recall as a library cataloger, several books crossed my desk by university professors. This would have been in the 1980s. Oh, these poor picked on people. Yeah, and that's how it was with homosexuals too. Why are we so mean to these people? They just want to be left alone. Yeah, and now they're forcing us to march in pride parades. The organization's efforts, Slatz writes, have dedicated themselves to crusades against child pornography bans, letter-writing campaigns to state representatives demanding child-likeness sex dolls be kept legal, and funding research into fantasy sexual outlets for pedophiles. She uncovered a tweet from Dr. James Cantor, part of the Prostasia team, who advocates for the idea that pedophilia is an innate condition, in which he said that pedophiles should be included in the alphabet people identity alphabet. Cantor wrote, quote, speaking as a gay man, I believe that we should include the P. To do otherwise is to betray the principles that give us our rights, unquote. For Cantor, pedophilia is just another kind of queer. Now, you may have thought, when I railed against this term, love is love, that it's a universal injunction, that I was guilty of hyperbole. No, I was not. And this is where we are headed. As part of their goals, Prostasia works on addressing the human rights impacts of child protection laws and policies and communicating the results of our research and engagement to policymakers, platforms, and the public. Prostasia has concerns that the existing policies to protect children from sexual abuse does more harm than good. They say that they undertake to reduce the separate harms caused to children and others by our society's predominantly reactive child protection agenda. Their platform includes internet freedom, under which they balance the removal of child sexual abuse imagery with their goal of not allowing censorship of lawful speech or redistributing liability for speech onto neutral internet platforms. As for sex worker rights, Prostasia states that they are strongly opposed to minors engaging in any kind of sex work, but they have concerns that measures to combat child sex trafficking target all sex workers in the name of protecting those who are underage, and that these are disproportionate and infringe the rights of adult sex workers. Berlatsky seems to see little difference between sex work and other kind of work, saying that lots of jobs require people to barter their health and their bodies, and comparing sex workers to people who work in mines. Some sex workers move to sex work because they feel they face less sexual abuse than in waitressing, for example. Yes, He actually wrote that. Berlasky calls children who have been trafficked into the sex trade young people trading in sex, and believes that the key way to help them is to deal with the root causes that led them to their involvement rather than dealing with the crime, sex trafficking itself, and root causes that led them to their involvement. How about being raped? How about that root cause? Prostasia looks to the kink community as well, saying that those undertaking to protect children from sexual abuse could learn from this community about practices that may reduce child sexual abuse. Yes, let's go to the Pride Parade and let's see a bunch of men dressed as dogs wearing choke chains and being led around by adult men dressed as their masters. They write that the majority of sexual offenses aren't the result of child sex trafficking, nor are they committed by known sex offenders, yet these are the targets of most child protection laws and policies, which explains why they're so ineffective. Berlasky locked down his Twitter account in the face of an onslaught of criticism. However, he wrote that he believed that he was being targeted by, quote, literal Nazis, unquote, who have made him, quote, the Jew to attack the day, unquote. Golly. I should think that there's an awful lot of Jews who would like to shut this guy up right now. You really think he's going to get away with this? Well, he has so far. He has so far. And there's strange people involved, sort of people that you wouldn't think would be involved in this kind of thing. Again, from a conservative woman, this is from Kathy Gingell, I'm not sure how it's pronounced. Most of us have become inured to the relentless downward spiral of the BBC, but it surely plumbs new depths with this latest offering, a tweet from Radio 4's Women's Hour asking, what's the best way to inform teenagers about porn? With breezy insouciance, as if pornography for the young was an accepted part of everyday life, the message continues, should there be age-appropriate porn, as has been suggested, so they can learn about consent and what's respectful and what's not? What do you think? Email us your opinions. An alert over the outrageous tweet was signaled by Return to Order, a campaigning website of the American Society for the Defense of Tradition, Family, and Property, and a backlash has begun. Return to Order has launched an online petition condemning the message, demanding its withdrawal and apology from the BBC. The website says, as Operation Underground Railroad Tim Ballard recently explained to the Daily Wire, sex traffickers rely upon pornographic material to ripen children for abuse. If they can get access, they will try to desensitize them by showing them sexual things. The consequences of this would be devastating. Besides the destruction of innocence and the addiction to pornography, which is already a pandemic, there is also the danger that these underage teenagers would emulate the perverse things they see. Worse, teaching age-appropriate pornography and softening it up with consent can very well lead to the worst sexual crimes, consensual pedophilia. We must nip this danger in the bud. An Australian woman who calls herself Aimee Therese was doing some investigation into this. And she begins with a clip from an article by a very strange woman who has an even stranger husband, although it may be equal. She writes for the Washington Post. Her name is Elizabeth Brunig. This is from The Atlantic, which of course is owned by Steve Jobs' widow. Modern porn education is totally unprepared for modern porn. Courses to train young people to be ethical consumers of porn have a hugely complex task ahead of them. I remember this joke on Peep Show. What's Tony Blair going to be, after he leaves office? And Superhan says, an ethical porn star. And the joke is funny because what would that mean? Well, who's laughing now? Earlier this year, Manhattan's prestigious Dalton School bid farewell to Justin Ang Fonte, its then director of health and wellness, who had guided the Academy's sex education for years. Their parting was the conclusion of a minor media scandal with all the makings of a major one. Fonte, who also gives presentations at other institutions, had become the subject of controversy after offering a frank porn literacy course to high schoolers at Columbia Grammar and Preparatory School in May, resulting in a scandalized write-up in the New York Post. A handful of Columbia parents were, it seemed, appalled by the allegedly explicit presentation Fonte had given their children. Fonte was taken aback. In her 9 years of teaching porn literacy courses, she had always felt that her work was well received. Exposure to porn is an almost guaranteed fact of adolescent life, thanks to the rise of smart devices and the ubiquity of the internet. And yet, Fonte told me, some parents may not be ready for the actual truth as to their role in addressing it and the reality of what their child is actually seeing. And Aimee Therese says, we need to spend more money on intersectional pornography consumption clerics, otherwise you won't know how to pay money to a black trans disabled sex worker. Wokely, we want feminist rape for money on camera, i.e. sexually and emotionally exploitative. Anyway, Bruning was 100% lying about what occurred at the school. The teacher, an extremely well-connected woke-tard, was showing masturbation cartoons to 6-year-olds. Aimee Therese comments, there was also the seminar given to Year 11 students, which included lessons on the marketability of OnlyFans, 16-year-old girls being taught to commodify themselves and others wokely, and pornography literacy, an intersectional focus on mainstream porn. You can see the market possibilities are endless. Moral imperialism from a fembot extraordinaire expanding beyond you and your kids' boundaries by slipping under your radar. Many of the parents at the school thought it ironic that no one had sought their consent re the lessons. The psychonaut woke-tards pretend it's hateful towards sex workers. Bruning pretends to be a conservative Catholic. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I can't believe you haven't elevated sex worker voices in the conversation. They're stakeholders too, you know. Anyway, Fong is connected AF, and all the ruling class NAMBLA leftist degenerates have her back. That's why Bruning wrote the article, to set the narrative of her being smeared and canceled by a powerful troglodyte, nascent right-wing supremacist movement. This is so important, y'all. Rich ladies need to talk more about the importance of getting themselves off. It's not enough that they're complete wankers 24/7. We must center the socialist feminist orgasm and elevate coital voices. Lux Magazine is a NAMBList leftist front from the same Ivy League CIA feminists behind the bullshit Justine Fonte also peddles, just like Ms. Magazine in the late 20th century and Margaret Sanger et al. In the early 20th century. The antinatalism, Malthusian death-drive bourgeois lunacy of Sophie, abolish the family Lewis, is the tip of the spear that Bruning softens up with her trad baby mama aesthetic. It's all just soft power. And they played the same game for a century. A new movement was starting. The baby had to have a name. The terms already in use, neo-Malthusianism, family limitation, and conscious generation, seemed stuffy and lacked popular appeal. Sophie Lewis, Ms. Magazine, Lux Magazine, all heirs to the legacy of Sanger and the women rebel. Training rich ladies to be ruthlessly exploitative fembot extortionists who fetishize destruction, death, don't think twice about grooming, about transgressing everyone else's boundaries for her pleasure, and act as tireless human accumulation machines for the Democratic National Committee. Mumsnet? Bad, fascist, middle-class moms without intersectional credentials have the audacity to think that they can have a forum to post where we can't label them fascist, misogynist, racist, incel chuds. Think again, Mumsnet. More like MGTOWNET, am I right? The Green New Deal, Fembot, DSA agenda, and all this repulsive NAMBLA leftism are all one thing. I've posted a fair bit about that aspect of this in the past, so won't belabor the point. But here they are in lockstep with, and often collaborate with, Open Society Foundation. That would be our old friend George Soros, especially NYCDSA. Bruning, Quote, give Fonte and other such professional managerial ideologies even more money for OnlyFans, ex-decolonial cream. I'm not going to repeat that sentence. Yes. And here's a picture of Noah Berlatsky. By the way, yeah, it's real. It's real and it's happening. Fonte's work, funded by hedge fund billionaires and laundered through NGO industrial complex via nonprofit focused on comprehensive sex ed. I see Elizabeth Bruning has faced some embarrassment over this and is trying to wriggle out of it. But so is there possibly a Canadian connection to this? Well, of course there would be. Could you imagine that it would come from the Conservative Party of Canada? Well, if you're surprised, you haven't been paying attention. Pat Kelly, who is the Member of Parliament for Calgary Rocky Ridge, the Shadow Minister of Small Business and Western Economic Development. He tweeted on August the 29th, happy birthday, Brody, and happy YYC Pride to all celebrating and YYCRR. And he is linked to an absolutely disgusting story by Sarah Rieger from the CBC. 12-year-old's friends didn't celebrate after he came out as gay, so a park full of strangers did. This is a 12-year-old boy. He's in grade 6. Well, let's have a bunch of adults drooling over him. A crowd full of strangers filled a Northwest Calgary park to celebrate a boy's rainbow-themed birthday during Pride Week. Leah O'Donnell says that when her son Brody Neville came out as gay this spring, the 12-year-old lost many of his friends. That made the prospect of celebrating his birthday this year a sad one. His mother said, I was asking him what he wanted to do for his birthday, and he was in tears and said since he came out as gay, he lost all his friends, so he didn't have people who could come. So she put out a call to the community to show him love, posting about his situation on Facebook, and turn out they did. Dozens of friends, family, strangers, and yes, some drag performers strutting to Born This Way filled the park near Ranchlands Community Center on Saturday. When Neville arrived in the park, he initially thought it was an unusual large crowd waiting for the ice cream truck. When he realized he was the guest of honor, he wrapped his mom in a giant hug. Thank you, everybody, for this. This is the best day of my life, a grinning Neville told the crowd. And I'm looking at a picture of the crowd, and there's overwhelmingly men, adult men. O'Donnell said that it was an opportunity to show her son that there's a supportive community waiting for him outside of the schoolyard bullies. I just wanted him to feel support. She said, drag queen Anna Kedvra came out at 19. She said she can't imagine the bravery it took for Neville to speak his truth. It's kind of ridiculous that in 2021, a 12-year-old can't be who they are. It's a very sad reality in this day and age, she said, but it's outrageously amazing that this little kid, even with all this adversity, can still be out there and feeling joy. Jessica Tailfeathers said seeing Saturday's turnout was inspiring. Showing up here today and seeing how many people in solidarity love him, it brought my faith back in humanity during such a tumultuous time in society. Neville said that the crowd was a lot to process. That's the greatest present of all, support and people in it together with you. Again, Pat Kelly. He retweeted this story from the CBC and sent a message, happy birthday, Brody, and happy YYC Pride to all celebrating. So is the Conservative Party of Canada, it's now part of their platform, is child sex grooming. Michelle Rempel, or Michelle Rempel Garner, as she now styles herself, she responded to MP Pat Kelly. Great story about the capacity for compassion and love in Northwest Calgary. Michelle Rempel, who wants to make poppers legal. There's a 6-letter word that I could use to describe her that begins with an F and ends with a G, but I won't do that because I don't want to be banned. Welcome to the Conservative Party of Canada. This isn't your grandfather's Tory party. Oh, no. Okay. Michael Mike says, did a cop rescue a kitten from a tree somewhere? Michelle Poppers, Rempel Garner, indeed. No, it has to be put very strongly to these people. This is not acceptable. That it is intolerable and will be treated as such. Ontario's sex ed curriculum is very NAMBLA friendly as well, says Metal Mike, who adds, we know what this is. It's the work of Satan. Oh, yes, some comments. MP Pat Kelly. Some people who, I guess they'd heard of this from me. Unbannable Bob said, see something you're into, Pat? Yeah, I like that response. What other responses do we have? Big Joe is 12 years old. Seymour Reality, PhD, says almost like the majority of his friends think it's not normal. Maybe adults should take note and stop glorifying mental illness. Hey, everyone, I just saw a photo of Michel Rempel sitting with Klaus Schwab. He's the leader of the Great Reset. How about that? How about that? And let's have a final look at the chat. I'm going to wrap it up. Gamion says we need to clean up the Augean stables. Yes, who will be our Hercules? Okay. These people's entire lives are consumed by thoughts of combing, says Chogoken 666. Funny how what goes on in the bedroom doesn't stay in the bedroom. Yes, that famous hypocritical line of Pierre Trudeau. It didn't never made any sense at the time. Oh, yeah, we're not interested in what goes on in the bedroom. We're not. We seem to be obsessed with sex. And lately, there's been a rather ridiculous debate about this notion of consent. Well, there's some women out there who apparently getting the shit beaten out of them when they're having sex, and some men who like to do it. This is formally against the law in Canada, but the law is not enforced. And so, no, this is wicked. Men are doing this. Well, I think it's wicked too. And others are saying, well, it's all about consent. Love is love. Nothing to do with you. Okay. The Denmark movement started by hooligans, but eventually became very broad. Left to far right media was unable to break them. Oh, which movement is this? Okay. Okay. That's it for today. Thanks you all for tuning in. What's coming up later in the week? I'm going to talk about Bach's Sons tomorrow because I thought that this story about Berlatsky et al. Is important, and I wanted to give it enough time. I'm going to be talking about a wonderful documentary about John Milius, the director and writer, on Theater Thursday. It came out in 2013 by Figueroa and Knudsen. I'm going to be talking about a Terror House book on the book club on Friday. Welcome to Hell by Bad Billy Pratt. I'll be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. If you like the show or any part of it, I appreciate it if you click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not done so already. If you would like to make a donation to this live stream, which would be very gratefully received at this difficult moment in my life, my PayPal account is linked to Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. Once again, Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. If you are in Canada, donations to the live stream may be made directly via Interac at kevingrace@shaw.ca. And as always, I leave you with this: in these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to forge a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.